From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Open Line.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Open Line. Glad you're with us tonight. This is a very exciting time. There is no doubt about it. We are one night away from the last presidential debate, and that debate is going to happen here in Nashville. So tonight I ask you, is anyone undecided? Are you one of the undecided voters? If you are, please call in. I would love to hear from you. And tonight we're going to be talking to people who have, opinions on both sides. And I really appreciate both of our guests for being here. Thank them for being here. They are joining us via Zoom, as all of our guests do now. We have with us State Senator Jack Johnson, Republican from Franklin. Senator, thank you for being with us.
Great to be with you.
And State Representative Jason Powell, Democrat from Nashville. Representative, thank you for being with us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Ben.
So obviously, Representative Powell, you support Biden, Senator Johnson, Trump. And so I just want to ask each of you. You start out, you watch the last debate. What do you hope your guy does this time? And Senator, I'll start with you and Trump. What would you like to see him do this time?
Well, thanks, Ben. It's great to be with you. What I hope President Trump does is focus on his record. The 3 years leading up to what was unfortunately the COVID pandemic. Our nation has experienced some of the greatest economic growth we've ever seen. Lowest unemployment rate that we've seen in generations, quite frankly. And we've witnessed the effects of that here in Tennessee where we had the lowest unemployment rate we've ever recorded. Our revenues were at an all-time high, which is an indicator of economic activity. And so when you talk to voters, and I've been traveling across the state campaigning for my fellow senators, Republican senators, and what people care about are their pocketbook. And obviously that's been impacted by COVID and by the economic shutdown. But President Trump, I think, led us into one of the strongest economies we've ever had. And we've taken a setback, obviously, because of the COVID pandemic. But I think he is the best person to lead us out of this and get us back to a strong economy.
So you'd like to see him talk about the economy. And Representative, I'll ask you the same question. What would you like to see Biden do tomorrow night?
Well, thanks again for the invitation to be here tonight. First of all, let me say I'm very excited this debate's going to be here in Nashville. So kudos to the city of Nashville. This is a big win for the city and the state of Tennessee. Quite frankly, I'm hoping we see more of the same. Last debate, as most people remember, was a complete failure for President Trump. He continued to interrupt Vice President Biden. He was rude. He came across as angry. And so I think that, and the polls certainly reflect this, Vice President Biden got a bump off of that. Trump continues to lag behind in the polls. And so, as long as Vice President Biden can continue to articulate his clear message, the fact that President Trump does not have a plan. At the last debate, you recall, he mocked masks, made fun of Vice President Biden for wearing a mask, and then we soon found out shortly thereafter President Trump, in fact, had COVID-19. And so that speaks directly to the lack of leadership that he's provided on this issue that has created so many different problems for us as a nation. And so we're really excited for Vice President Biden. I think the 6 issues they're going to bring up fit well into his narrative, and we're hoping for more of the same, just consistency.
So yeah, the 6 issues are fighting COVID, American families, race in America, climate change, national security, and leadership. Senator, I want to ask you, what did you think of Trump's performance in the last debate? I mean, you just heard Representative Powell say he would like to maybe see more of the same, and that Trump interrupted, and many people feel like he did not win that last debate. But how do you feel his performance was in that last debate?
Well, I would say that certainly if I'd been in his position, and I never will be, but maybe I would have handled it a little bit different. But I think the president is rightfully frustrated. He's taking on not only the former Vice President Kamala Harris as his Democratic opposition for the presidency, but he's taking on a fairly hostile media. And we can grade the performance of the debate moderator and how they did that. But I think clearly he was frustrated. I will say, I hope in the debate tomorrow night that he does, as I said earlier, focus more on his record, on his accomplishments, because I do think it's quite an incredible record. He inherited one of the worst economies that we've had, and job growth, small business creation, home ownership, just go on down the line. And, if COVID had not happened, I think President Trump would be winning in a landslide. And I think it's curious that the Democrats accuse the president, or criticize the president rather, because of his regarding his handling of the COVID pandemic. But what you hear from the Democrats is they blame him for a recession, but then they blame him that he hasn't done enough to mitigate the COVID pandemic. And I would say that it's a difficult situation. We've certainly, Jason and I have had to deal with this with Governor Lee and the administration here in Tennessee, and how we mitigate those efforts. And it's difficult to strike a balance between not absolutely destroying our economy while at the same time trying to do everything we can to keep people safe.
So if one of the issues is COVID, what do you think Biden should do, and how vulnerable do you think he is, Representative Powell? What do you think?
Sure. So I think clearly this is a strength for Vice President Biden. And I think a lot of the frustrations in Americans recognize this is the fact that we had months to prepare and to get ready. And instead, President Trump was not upfront with the American people. And as a result, we found ourselves in a behind and faced, a really serious situation here in this country, and we're quite frankly caught flat-footed. And so, doing things like we all agree that masks are a responsible thing to do. The president spent months and months, not pushing masks, not encouraging people to wear masks, and that certainly helped. Most recently, he's gone out and he's mocked, Dr. Fauci. And I think most Americans feel like Dr. Fauci has led and he has been a responsible voice on this issue. And so to go out and mock him and criticize him, especially this late juncture, I think is really damaging for President Trump. And most Americans recognize the fact that he has not led on this issue in a way that we expect of our president to lead. And so I think this is a strong issue for it's for Vice President Biden to address. And hopefully, as we see it's one of the issues, we'll know good to spend some time on it.
I'll ask Representative Powell next about the economy that you brought up, Senator. But how do you respond to what he's saying there about Trump didn't handle this COVID-19 well, we didn't prepare well, and we were left flat-footed, and he's attacking Fauci?
Yeah, so I remember very clearly back in late February, early March, when this was first coming into our country, when we were getting the very first diagnoses. And I remember very clearly Dr. Fauci, who, by the way, I have tremendous respect for. I think he's a brilliant physician and obviously an expert in this field. But I remember him on TV telling people there was no benefit in wearing masks. In the early days of the pandemic, he said that on TV. You had Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer encouraging people to go out and not, go to festivals, go to things in their communities. So there was a lot of confusion early on in this, and I think it's it's easy, but I don't think it's beneficial with the benefit of hindsight now, many months later, to look back. I think we could all find a lot of areas to criticize, Democrats, Republicans, doctors, Dr. Fauci, the CDC, on some mixed guidance and a lot of information that was coming out and mixed messages that we were receiving. What I do know about this president is that he shut down, he instituted the travel ban from China. That early on, the doctors were predicting, the models were predicting that we could have over 2 million deaths in the United States. We've had a little over 200,000, and that's far too many. And any death is tragic by any stretch of any measurement. But I think what the president did with the information he had at the time, he did the best he could, and we've learned from it. And just as we've learned on the state level about different things that we can do to help mitigate this pandemic.
Well, early on, there was some confusion about masks, but that changed, and it seems like he was still questioning masks long after Fauci had changed his mind on that. Do you agree with that or not?
Well, I think I don't want to speak for the president. What I do know is that we believe that masks work. The president has said on numerous occasions that he encourages people to wear masks and to use them when they can't appropriately social distance. And it's a difficult situation for anyone to be in. And again, there was a lot of misinformation and mixed messages that were going on in the early days of this. So we've all learned a lot as this has progressed.
And Representative, so what the senator said earlier is he hopes that the president talks about the economy and how the economy was doing before this. What do you think about that? Is that a good story for President Trump? How does Biden counter that, if it is, in your opinion?
Sure. So first of all, I would say that the President Trump benefited from inheriting the economy left behind by President Obama and Vice President Biden, which when they assumed office was in complete tatters. I mean, we're in the midst of a tremendous recession. And the things that then President Obama and Vice President Biden did helped turn this country around, saved industries like the auto industry, which is very strong here in our own state, and helped rebuild and made sure that the housing crisis was a complete disaster, and made sure that we turned those things around, stabilized the country. We saw years after year of growth. And so I think President Trump in many ways benefited from the economy that he inherited from President Obama and Vice President Biden. Unfortunately, because the actions that we've seen by President Trump and his failure to respond quickly to the things that have happened, now our economy is in real tatters. We have record unemployment. We continue to see many Americans, they're still looking for a job and facing difficulties, issues with our schools. And so, I think that ultimately most people recognize that President Trump benefited from the economy and the economic policies that he inherited from then President Biden, who was also consulted obviously closely with Vice President Biden. And
I'm sure tomorrow night taxes will come up, and Biden has said he wants to repeal the Trump tax cuts. President Trump says that'll hurt the economy. Biden says that'll be reinvested and help people. Let me start with you on that. What about repealing the Trump tax cuts? And that's going to clearly be an area where both sides kind of go at it tomorrow night. What do you think Biden needs to say?
Well, I think that Biden needs to focus on making sure that what his message has been this entire time, which is we're going to make sure that middle-class Americans have a fair tax code that is going to treat us all equally and not continue to give tax benefits to Wall Street and others that are ultra wealthy in this country. I mean, look at the president himself. He's only paid, according to different news reports, this most recent tax, he paid $750. So most Americans recognize that the kind of things that President Trump has pushed as far as taxes have not benefited them. They're no better off today than they were 4 years ago. And, I would just say you got to look at President Trump's own taxes and his record there with being able to escape paying taxes, which I know many Tennesseans are middle class and the working Tennesseans pay a lot more taxes than even he does.
So what do you think of that, Senator? What do you think?
Well, I can't wait to see a guy who's had no job other than working for the federal government for the last 50 years criticize someone who's created a massive company worth billions of dollars, employing tens of thousands of people, paying hundreds of millions of dollars in property taxes, payroll taxes, capital gains taxes, and so forth. I think it'd be real curious to see someone who's never had a job other than working for the government criticize someone who's only been in politics for 47 months now. The other gentleman's been in politics for 47 years, criticize him for failure to pay taxes or, for a lack of acknowledgement with regards to how he handles the economy. So I think that I'd love to see Vice President Biden lob that softball up for President Trump. Now, relative to the economy, whatever kind of economy you inherit, whether it's a good economy or a bad economy, that doesn't carry on for 3 years. And again, I take you back to January, February of this year, pre-COVID, when you had the lowest unemployment rate we've had in generations. You've had lowest unemployment rate among minorities, women, small business growth, the fastest we've ever seen in the history of the United States. And as far as tax cuts go, I think it's a very fair question. I'm glad you brought it up, because both Vice President Biden and Senator Harris have said they will repeal the president's tax cuts. Well, the bulk of those tax cuts went to middle-class families. The average family of four saved $2,000 a year on their tax bill. Now, on one hand, they say, oh, we're only going to raise taxes on the rich, people who make over $400,000. But then they also say we're going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. So if they do repeal the Trump tax cuts, it's going to be an enormous tax increase on middle-class families, and it will be devastating to our economy.
What do you say to that, Representative?
You know, I think that we certainly need to make sure that we have a fair tax code, and most people recognize that the Trump tax cuts have not directly benefited them. There were some, different one-time payments that went out, and certainly, we need to make sure that working families, especially now that are struggling through everything that's happened with COVID-19, are treated fairly. And I simply disagree and think that the Trump tax cuts benefited the ultra wealthy to an extreme degree, and left just a little bit behind for the middle class and others that are struggling to make it.
What do you both think about the fact they're going to turn down the mics when the other person is talking for that first question? And Senator, I'll start with you. I mean, so this is, they say it's not a rule change. They're just kind of enforcing the rules that both sides already agreed to. I think the president was not happy with that, but he's obviously still participating. So they're going to turn down the mic when the president is not speaking and when the vice president is not speaking. And then there'll be other parts where the mic is up. But what do you think about that rule, that change, Senator?
I think it's fine. I think it's fine for that initial question when they give their 2-minute response, whatever it is, when the initial question is asked. I think it's important to note, though, that they will not be doing that during what they refer to as the discussion portion of the debate, and I think that that's good. I do wish that that both candidates would allow the other to speak and let them finish their thoughts before they engage. But I will say, for those of us who are fans of President Trump, and watch how the media ask him questions, how they interview him, debate moderators and so forth, and then the softballs that they throw to Vice President Biden on many instances. I think we're all frustrated, and I understand the president's frustration and why he's eager to get in there and mix it up and make sure he says what he wants to be said. But I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on the overall outcome of the debate.
And what do you think, Representative?
Well, I certainly think that the last time it really negatively impacted President Trump with his constant interrupting and cutting in. So I'm glad as a viewer. I mean, I think a lot of people agree that the last debate was very difficult to watch just because there was so much interruption and wouldn't let people have the civil discourse. I'll note that the moderator at the last debate was is a pretty well-known TV personality from a conservative, considered a more conservative-leaning station, and so I think it's comical to think that he would have been throwing softballs to Vice President Biden. But nevertheless, I tend to agree here with Jack that I don't think it's going to have a tremendous impact on the debate because the open portion is still going to allow for this. They're not going to be cutting the mics, so we'll see if President Trump is more disciplined. I wouldn't count on it. And I think what's really going to be interesting is if the mics are cut, and they're still in the same room. I mean, even though the mic is cut, could you still see or hear one or the other rebutting? I'd say you probably would be more likely to see President Trump trying to interrupt. But I think that would be really something to watch if. Even though the mics are cut, he's still sometimes visuals are more important than the actual sound or voice, but we'll see how that all plays out.
Well, I remember back in 2000 when Al Gore was criticized for sighing. He sighed a few times, and that was unconscionable. And what I saw in the last debate was just, very hard to watch is the nicest way to put it. Now, Senator, do you think, though, when you bring up the moderator, do you think that's what was the cause here? Do you think that, or is it just Trump's personality?
I think it's a combination. And again, and Jason, I'll tell you, Chris Wallace, who, by the way, I'm a fan of. I think he's by and large a fair journalist, but I certainly wouldn't characterize him as a conservative by any stretch, even if he's on Fox News. But no, I'm not. I think it's frustration on the part of the president and certainly a lot of his supporters, just in terms of the what we perceive to be bias in a lot of the national media towards the president. I'm sure many of your viewers have kept up with this 60 Minutes issue that took place the other day with an interview at the White House. So again, I'm not making excuses for it, but I certainly am sympathetic to the president for a degree of frustration and his efforts to try to get his message out.
All right, very interesting. That kind of sets the table. So now I want to open up the phone lines. What do you guys think? What does everybody think? Number one, are you undecided? That would be great. Call in. If you're not undecided, call in. Tell us what you hope to see tomorrow night, what you're expecting to see tomorrow night. This is just a very interesting, fun time and very important time. We'll take a break. Start taking calls right after this.